Two investors, same starting money, same 10 years. The one followed the classic three-fund portfolio, the one every expert tells you to use. The other changed just 3 funds. After 10 years on $100,000, that one change made a $140,000 difference. Same effort, same monthly deposits, wildly different results. And the craziest part, the winning portfolio didn't use risky penny stocks. It didn't use crypto. It used 3 boring, low-cost ETFs that anyone can buy today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 3 funds to own in 2026. You'll know how much to put into each one based on your age, and you'll have 10 years of real performance data to back every single pick. But the biggest surprise isn't in the growth slot, it's in the safety slot. Because the fund most people trust to protect their money, it actually lost more than the stock market in the last major crash. Now, quick note, I'm not a financial advisor. Everything here is for educational purposes only. For your specific situation, always check with a qualified professional. Let's start with the slot where the money gap is the biggest, growth. And the numbers here aren't even close. The growth slot, 156K versus 607K. The classic 3-fund portfolio puts your growth money into international stocks. The go-to pick is VXUS, Vanguard Total International Stock. The idea makes sense on paper. Invest outside the United States, get exposure to different economies, spread your risk around the world. But here's what 10 years of data actually shows. If you put $100,000 into VXUS 10 years ago, today you'd have about $156,000. That's roughly a 9% annualized return. Not terrible, but not great either. Now look at what happened if you picked a US large cap growth fund instead. SCHG, Schwab US Large Cap Growth. Same $100,000, same 10 years. It grew to roughly $465,000. That's a 19% annualized return. And QQQ, the NASDAQ 100, that same $100,000 turned into over $600,000, a 21% annualized return over the same exact period. That's not a small difference. That's your kid's college fund. That's 5 extra years of retirement income from one fund swap. Now here's where I have to be honest with you, because most videos won't say this part. In 2025, international stocks had their best year in over a decade. VXUS returned over 32%. It actually beat US stocks for the first time in 10 years. So dropping international completely, that's a bet, not a guarantee. Smart investors don't ignore that. They weigh it. And right now, the data still favors US growth, but I wouldn't pretend international doesn't exist. More on that when we get to the allocations. For the growth slot, my pick is SCHG. It costs just 0.04% per year. It's broader than QQQ, less concentrated in just 10 companies, and it's still delivered roughly 19% annualized over 10 years. QQQM is a strong runner-up if you want pure NASDAQ 100 exposure at a lower fee than QQQ. So, the growth slot is clear, but growth means nothing if you can't protect it, and what the data says about the safety slot, it flips everything most people believe. The safety slot, the bond myth. Here's the myth. Bonds keep you safe in a downturn. For decades, that was the rule. When stocks go down, bonds go up. Your bond fund is your safety net. In 2022, the stock market crashed. The S&P 500 dropped over 18%, and BND, Vanguard's total bond market, the classic safe pick, it fell 13.11%, worse than nearly anyone expected. It was the worst calendar year in BND's entire history. Think about that. The fund people trusted to protect them during a crash actually lost more than some stock funds that same year. Now here's what a lot of finance YouTubers say next. Replace your bonds with SCHD, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF. And at first glance, the data looks like a slam dunk. In 2022, SCHD only dropped about 3.3%, while BND fell 13% and the S&P dropped 18%. SCHD barely flinched. Plus, over 10 years, SCHD returned roughly 13% per year. BND returned about 1.5%. That's not even in the same universe. So, case closed, right? Ditch bonds forever? Not so fast. Here's what those same people never show you. In 2020, when COVID crashed the market overnight, SCHD dropped 33.4% peak to trough. That's almost identical to the S&P 500. SCHD is not a bond. It is a stock fund, a really good stock fund that focuses on quality dividend companies. But it is 100% equities, and in a real panic, it drops like equities drop. Here's the truth. Bonds and dividend stocks protect you against different kinds of crashes. In 2022, we had a rate crash. Interest rates shot up. Bonds got crushed. SCHD held strong because it wasn't sensitive to rates. In 2020, we had a liquidity crash. Everything sold off. Stocks fell fast. SCHD fell right alongside them. BND barely moved. Smart investors don't pick one or the other. They know when each one matters. And here's something that's changed. In 2026, BND yields about 4 to 4.5%. That's real income. During the 2010s, bonds paid next to nothing. That made them easy to dismiss. But zero interest rates are gone now. Bonds actually pay you again. For the safety and income slot, my pick is SCHD as the primary fund. It yields about 3.22%. Its dividend has grown every single year for 14 straight years. It returned about 13% annualized over the last decade. But for investors over 50, I'd also bring BND back, not as your main holding, as your crash insurance for the type of downturn SCHD can't handle. We'll get to exact percentages in a minute. Before I show you exactly how to build this portfolio, drop a comment right now. Are you currently holding bonds, dividend ETFs, or both in your portfolio? I read every single comment. Now you've got your growth engine and your income shield. The foundation, the anchor, that's where most people overthink it. The foundation, your anchor. This one is simple. VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. It holds the 500 largest US companies. It costs 0.03% per year, and over the last decade, it returned about 15% annualized over the last decade. Or VTI, Vanguard Total Stock Market. It holds about 3,600 stocks. Same 0.03% fee. Returns are nearly identical to VOO because the top 500 companies make up about 85% of both funds anyway. You can't go wrong with either one. So here's your 3-fund lineup for 2026. Fund 1, VOO or VTI, your foundation, the broad US market. Fund 2, SCHG, your growth engine, large cap US growth companies. Fund 3, SCHD, your income and stability layer, quality dividend payers. That's the thumbnail promise delivered. Growth, income, safety, 3 funds. But the question that matters more than which funds you pick, how much goes into each one, and it changes based on one number, your age. Your allocation by age, the blueprint. Let's say Kevin is 34. He just opened a brokerage account. He can invest $500 a month. Kevin has time, 30 years before he even thinks about retirement, so his portfolio should lean into growth. For his 30s, I'd set it up like this: 40% in VOO, 35% in SCHG, and 25% in SCHD. If Kevin invests $500 a month at roughly 15% annualized returns, in 30 years, he's looking at over $3 million. That's the power of starting in your 30s with the right allocation. Now meet Patricia. She's 48. She's been investing for 15 years and has about $280,000 across her accounts. Patricia has time, but not as much. She's also in her peak earning years, so her portfolio needs more balance. For the 40s and 50s, I'd set it up as 45% VOO, 25% SCHG, 20% SCHD, and 10% BND. Here's a tax tip for Patricia. She should keep SCHD inside her Roth IRA. For 2026, the contribution limit is $7,500. If she's over 50, it's $8,600. All those dividends grow tax-free inside a Roth. Put SCHG in the taxable account because growth funds are naturally tax efficient. They don't throw off much income until you sell. And then there's James and Linda, both 62. They have $650,000 saved. Retirement is 3 years away. Their portfolio has a different job now. It needs to produce income and survive a downturn without them panicking. For
For the 60s and beyond, I'd set it up as 40% VOO, 10% SCHG, 30% SCHD, and 20% BND. Here's what that looks like in real dollars. 30% in SCHD on $650,000 is $195,000. At a 3.22% yield, that's roughly $6,270 a year in dividends alone. And that number has grown every year for 14 straight years. The 20% in BND, that's their crash insurance. If the stock market drops 30% tomorrow, BND holds steady. James and Linda don't have to sell stocks at the bottom. They live off dividends and bond income until the market recovers. I'd also suggest 1 to 3 years of living expenses in a high-yield savings account. In 2026, the best ones still pay over 4%. That cash buffer means they never have to touch their investments during a downturn. And don't forget, the 401k contribution limit for 2026 is $24,500. If you're between 60 and 63, there's a new super catch-up that lets you put in an extra $11,250. Max those out before adding to a taxable account. Growth builds your wealth. Income protects your lifestyle. Safety protects your sleep. Write that down.
Now, before you go set this up, there's one mistake I see smart investors make with this exact strategy, and it's the one that quietly costs them the most. The trap smart investors fall into. Here's the trap. You see the 10-year data. You think you should put everything into whatever did the best. That instinct, it's exactly what cost investors money in 2022.